Good afternoon, everyone. Kia ora. We're just going to give it a 1 or 2 more minutes just for some people to jump on. I know it's lunchtime over there in New Zealand, and we'll just wait 1 or 2 more minutes. A nice lunch and learn session. Right, good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to spend with us this afternoon. Today we're going to be talking about self-service reporting and analytics with integrated data governance. My name's Chris Benson. I am the Director for Data Analytics and AI for Versor. I've been with the company around 4 years. Versor is a Fujitsu company, and so most of you would probably know Fujitsu in New Zealand. We're wholly owned by Fujitsu. Unfortunately, today we do not have Dave Stewartson, who was going to join us to talk more on the data governance side. I will be doing that in his stead. He is unwell, so you have me for about 45 minutes to an hour, and there's a fair bit to go through. We may not take all the time. If you've got any questions, post them in the question box and we'll see if we can get back to you. As well as if you've got any questions afterwards, just get hold of your contacts that sent you the email and the webinar invite, and they'll also contact you as well and send the questions through to us. So what's our agenda for today? A bit of an introduction on why self-service analytics and governance. Then we'll talk about self-service reporting and analytics and some of the governance structures that we need to put into place into Power BI to enable that. We'll talk about integrated data governance within the Power BI environment, and then we will do a demonstration. So let's just jump straight into it. So really, you've got two sides of the BI spectrum within most organizations. You've got self-service business intelligence, which is something that's really starting to take traction around organizations at the moment. And then you've got enterprise business intelligence. Self-service business intelligence, you want to put in the hands of your subject matter experts. You want to put it in the hands of the users. They know their own data. They've got the agility and the go to actually want to start building their own reports, to start getting insights into their data. On the other side, we've got standard enterprise BI, which wants to have some form of control around the reports that are being built. They want to be able to operationalize the reports and see what's going on around performance. They want to manage the deployments. They want to manage security and the governance, etc. So how do we merge those two together? And hence the ubiquitous, always used Venn diagram. We want to create a well-governed, standardized environment where we can take the agility of the self-service, but still apply the governance that enterprise BI want over the top of it. Because self-service BI can become a little bit like Excel hell, right? If you don't put the right governance practices into your Power BI platform, before you know it, you've got reports all over the place, reporting off many different data sets, insecure data sets, untrusted data sets, etc. If you put too much control in the hands of the enterprise BI side, then that stifles the agility and the innovation that the self-service side can bring. And so how do we bring those two together to make sure that we can still provide that control, but and have the innovation as well? So essentially, that's what we're going to be talking about in this webinar. The first part that we're going to be talking about is really how do we go about setting up your Power BI environment and enabling your users for that self-service. So essentially creating a governance framework within Power BI that still allows that innovation, but has some strict controls around how users move into the enterprise, how users move reports into the enterprise BI space. And so what we're looking to do here is initially create a center of excellence for business intelligence. And there's really 5 core steps around that. How do we get some of the tool sets and so on into the hands of the users, and what skill sets are kind of required? How do we maintain and share knowledge? How do we initially engage with those users, and who will drive the COE moving forward? So I'll come back more to the center of excellence a bit later. The first thing that we really need to do is before we give users the tools and the Power BI environment, we need to ensure that we set up our Power BI tenant in such a way that it can handle it. We also need to make sure that we give the users a really good background into Power BI and the standards that we expect of them in order for them to be able to get data into that enterprise environment. So I'm going to be speaking specifically to how do we enable our Power BI tenancy to allow that, and then what are some of the best practices that we have around visualization that we need to teach our users, so that when they bringing reports to the enterprise BI team to take into the enterprise BI environment, that those reports match the expected standards and processes and so on that we expect out of an enterprise BI environment. Once we've done that, we go and we train our users and we enable our users within the Power BI environment. We create a community of practice, and then, as you can see, the circle just carries on. We develop and enhance and enable certain features, disable certain features. Once again, look at our best practices and so on, and re-enable our users. So if we just gave our users right now Power BI desktop, that would enable our users to begin to innovate right off the cuff. They could actually, if the enterprise allowed it, they could install Power BI desktop, they could connect to data sources, and they could begin to actually create reports within that environment. And that's essentially that Power BI free that you see in this space here. Without a Power BI Pro license, they would not be able to publish into a shared workspace and therefore share the report to their team and share the report to more enterprise-based users if you are using Power BI Premium. The thing is, in order to get users started within Power BI, the one thing that you don't want to do is just give them the license without having a look at how to control the workspaces and the enterprise workspaces, because what can happen is they can begin to develop and just deploy and begin creating workspaces all on their own and push it into enterprise workspaces all on their own. And before you know it, you've got that same, Excel hell, excuse me. becomes Power BI hell. And so what we want to do is we want to specifically control the reports that go into the enterprise workspaces. Now, here I'm saying it's premium. It doesn't need to be premium if you don't have premium. It just means that you're controlling the workspaces that you've set up for enterprise environment. You want to make sure that users are building to a standard and processes and to the data sets that you've gone ahead and certified before you get any reports into this enterprise workspace. This enterprise workspace is controlled by your enterprise team. Essentially, what will happen is your user will be able to publish into their personal workspace, work within their personal workspace. They could even share their link if they wanted to in their personal workspace to other users, but it doesn't really form a collaborative environment. If they're wanting to collaborate with other users, they would then want to push this to a Teams workspace. In order to do that, we need to enable them to be able to have a Power BI Pro license and set up a Teams workspace for them. This isn't a team like if you had accounting, for example. This isn't a team of all the accountants on the floor. This is a Teams workspace where the subject matter experts would come together within your self-service environment to actually collaborate and develop their own reports in that environment, and then be able to just share between one another. Once they're happy with that, they'd want to then share that with their broader team, the rest of the accounting department, and typically that would then go through into your enterprise workspace. In order to do that, though, there needs to be some very strict deployment access controls to get to this, to get to this point over here. And the reason for that is that, again, we want to make sure that the enterprise workspaces are well governed, well controlled, that they're using certified data, certified trusted data sets, so that you always have that single source of truth, that they're using the right visualizations and themes and etc. that you've set up and templates, Power BI templates, to get into that workspace. So that deployment access that we're talking about here is really a gate that the enterprise control for users to be able to bring their self-service reports into an enterprise environment. Because without that control, as I've already mentioned, we begin to have untrusted data and so on. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we've got good governance practices at this point. So there are, inside of the tenant itself, you can go in and you can set up very strict controls around who can create workspaces, who can access workspaces, and how those workspaces are typically accessed. You can also set up what they call certified data sets that have been ratified by your enterprise BI to say that they've gone through a rigorous process to make sure that the numbers that they are looking at have been trusted, have been verified against the original source, been verified with the business. Because once again, you don't want 100 different reports out there saying different numbers. You know, sales were 100,000 and somebody else has got a sales at 102,000. You want to make sure that sales is always that verified number, and in this case, let's say it was 100,000, that everybody that ever creates a report in the enterprise workspace says that sales number was 100,000 for that particular filtered data set. In order to get your users across that and to make sure that they building the right reports with the right framework in mind, we need to set up some clear reporting principles and guidelines. We need to make sure that they've got a template, a Power BI template that they can use that's been set up with the right headers, footers, themes, that the right font is selected, that the right color has been selected, and so on. Because again, the last thing you want in your enterprise environment is this mismatch of all sorts of different colors. They're not using the organization's colors and themes. So you want to make sure that's all been set up correctly initially. You want to make sure that the reports that are being deployed have a very clear purpose, and that we avoid any ambiguity in the reporting. There's a lot of research out there that particularly stipulates that if you've got a dashboard, that users reading that dashboard should be able to understand the context and understand the numbers, etc., within that dashboard within 5 to 10 seconds. If you haven't captured the audience within 5 to 10 seconds on that dashboard, you're either don't have a minimalistic design on that dashboard. For example, you've got too much information. That's no longer a dashboard. Now you're starting to talk to detailed reporting, right? And the other one is you may have introduced ambiguity, and you can see ambiguity coming into play a little bit with the graphs that I've got on the screen at the moment. You can see that we've got something in the mining, which is top 10 loader downtime events, right? So a loader is a type of vehicle. It picks up some coal and it goes and dumps coal. And so you could create a pie chart around this that shows the different wait times and the type of the description for the wait. So they waited for a fitter to come and do something. But what you're seeing is ambiguity, because the minute you go to the smaller components in there, you start to lose what they are. You can't even see. You can only see 4 conditions on that particular graph. A better way to do it would have been to use a bar graph, which shows all of the weight events. And in this case, it's also got the duration, and it's sorted descendingly. So you can see that weight fitter was the most amount of time, then hydraulics, then electrical, etc. If somebody had to look at the first graph and is trying to determine the smaller angles in that graph, what they actually represented, well, you've introduced ambiguity into your reporting environment. And so these are the kind of things that you would be teaching your users to make sure that when they get to that enterprise reporting stage, that they've thought about all of these principles and guidelines before getting to there, so that your enterprise team is only looking at and saying, hey, have they abided by the rules that we've put in place? Yes or no. If not, they send it back to the user to say, hey, you need to update it, or the enterprise team, just if they can, they either update the report and then bring it into the enterprise environment. Once you've now managed to create a governed and put all the governance and security best practice into your Power BI environment, you've gone and created the reporting principles and guidelines. You've created the themes, the templates, the color scheme, the fonts, etc., that the users will use. You can move on to actually training and enabling your SMEs in the business that are actually going to begin to build the Power BI reports. We have done this for a large mining company, and went through some very specific processes with them to enable this. over time, it was determined that there were some best practices that we could learn from the training and enablement part, and I've identified some of those best practices here. So one of the first things you want to do is identify a trial group, and that is to say that you want to be able to get some feedback to understand what was working and what wasn't working very well. So as you move forward with your training program, you can improve on it over time. You want to make sure that the people that are going to be involved are going to want to turn up to the training, are going to want to actually do the training and so on as well, because it is a commitment from them, it's a commitment from you. And the reason why you want them turning up is because you want that feedback around how the training is going and how well it's going. This also feedback into your governance strategy that you set up on Power BI, and allows you to begin to see if that is working well or not working well, as well as refining those principles and guidelines that I mentioned around the reporting. How are you going to deliver it? Is it going to be online or in person? One of the things that we realized is don't take 8 hours a day from a user. They've got other work to do, so it's always best to do it over time. So if you've got a 2-day course that normally runs 16 hours, it's best to do 4 hours on one day, 4 hours on another day, and then possibly the following week 4 hours and 4 hours. So spread 16 hours over 2 weeks. You need to cover content from beginner to advanced. Some people will know what Power BI is. They might have even started playing with it. Others would never have heard of it before. And so you need to cover everything from the beginner to the advanced for all users. One of the things that we found very, very helpful was for them during the advanced stages of the course was to bring in their own data. So because they're the subject matter experts, they understand their data and so on, it's best to go in and show them what is possible within Power BI on their own data sets. So that they can see the benefit that can be brought out of Power BI by using their own data sets. And then obviously feedback is especially important. And as I mentioned, that feedback then enables us to refine and improve and redeliver the training. And then finally in this section, one of the things is as you train more and more users, so you're going to have this community of people that are going to have a number of questions, they're going to want to share ideas, etc. The best thing to do then is to set up that community of practice. Start small. Don't try and boil the ocean. Start small. So set up a team site. Get the guys involved there. Get them asking questions and so on. The big thing here is that it should be led by the business and run by the business, not run by IT. So let the business pose the questions, let them answer the questions. The IT can be involved. They can be moderators in there. They can help with questions and pointing to the right people, but they shouldn't be the ones running it, because what will happen is then the community loses interest in the things that they're doing. It's best if they're involved. Don't focus a lot on the technology, as I've already mentioned. So people want to go out and they want to look for the best community of practice tools and so on. Set up a team site, add the people in there and get them just starting to talk. The other thing is you might just get some initial articles written by your IT department in there, common links and things like that, just to get started. But once you've done that, leave it to the community. And it's always good to also identify, somebody within the business that is going to help run this. You always find that there's somebody out there that's really a go-getter, and they love doing reporting, and they love what Power BI can bring to their organization. So let them be the advocates out there and really spreaking the community of practice. Right, so we've now set up our Power BI environment. We've put in some standards and practices. We've gone and trained our users, etc. Within that. Now what we want to actually bring into this is some data governance. Many of you have probably heard of Purview, which is a data governance tool from Microsoft. And what we're going to be specifically talking about now is some of the data governance features of how Power BI can link into Purview and vice versa. So what is data governance? There's a lot of people going boring, right? And yes, I've been down that road as well, but it's especially important when it comes to self-service, right? Because if you've got well-managed, well-governed data, and we're not talking about the security of it and the things that we've already spoken about in terms of locking it down and making sure that we've got trusted data and so on. This is more the description of the data. We're talking about more the glossary of the data and so on. The self-service part of it will help to describe what that data is. And so users sometimes, don't understand all of what they're looking at. I've seen in many organizations, you can talk about sales, but marketing might have a different definition of sales to what sales has. Finance might have a different definition to sales. It might include GST, exclude GST. It might include certain things or exclude certain things. So having a well-governed data environment is exceptionally important to describe your data. There's some descriptions on the screen that I'm sure all of you can read, but essentially data governance manages the collection, cleansing, provisioning, securing, and eventual deletion of an organization's data. That's the standard definition. But the why data governance is especially important, and from a self-service perspective, yes, it enables that user to get an understanding of the data, but then there's a whole bunch of other pieces behind it, which is around regulatory compliance and so on, which is very, very important as well. So data governance for self-service reporting, there's defensive side and there's the offensive side. Offensive not being, offensive to somebody. It's more proactive and reactive side of things. So the defensive use cases is really what we've already spoken about in the previous environment. So we've got to set up our environment around access and so on, and sensitive data protection and all of that sort of thing. And Power BI has some of that included in it, right? We can go in and we can review user access. We can review how data is controlled in our enterprise environment. We've got sensitivity labels that we can put onto certain reporting and so on. And you've also got the defined metrics. And part of the defined metrics actually also falls into the offensive side of it, because we need to describe those metrics correctly. On the offensive use cases, we talk about our business glossary, right? So a really good, clear understanding of our data and the definitions of our data terms. Every table needs to have a definition. Every element in the table needs to have a definition, and every measure that we create needs to have a really good definition. We talk about data lineage. So one of the things that Purview can do is it can link back into Power BI, and it can actually set up the lineage between how Power BI gets its data and then presents that data. It has, you can create data quality measures, and then there's something called data labs, which, essentially is what I was talking about around self-service, which allows users to create new new reports, new data, etc., and pull in new data sources. So in Power BI, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly, in Power BI, we already have some of these governance mechanisms because we've spoken about this previously when we spoke about setting up your Power BI environment. There are things around data loss prevention policies. Really what Microsoft is saying around that is that you can set up certain access rights within Power BI so that only certain users can see certain data. The other thing there is you can stop users exporting data, for example, down to Excel. So one of the features of Power BI is you can actually say, hey, open this Power BI reports data set inside of Excel and sit and drag and drop. Well, you might not want to allow that because once it's in Excel, people then can, send that along to other users, etc. We want to monitor report performance. That's really important, especially when you begin to go to, well, anytime really, but when you're on premium instances, you want to make sure that you've got the right visualizations in place. Custom visuals or poor custom visuals can cause real performance issues for you. So you want to make sure that you're monitoring the performance correctly. We've spoken about this briefly, dev, test, and production environments, right? So if we went back to the, sorry, let me just go all the way back to this area here. Essentially, we treat dev and test as these two areas here and production as this area. It's not saying that your team's workspace where they're doing collaboration on reporting isn't a production report. It could be, but essentially if you're wanting to bring it to further users, really productionize it or bring it into the enterprise environment, we're essentially talking about this as the production reporting environment. So having a good logical separation of dev, test, and prod workspaces is important. The way that you can do this with premium is you can leave Power BI service workspaces as team workspaces only, and then only enable premium workspaces for enterprise workspace environment. If you've only got Power BI service, then what you would do is you would lock this down and name it appropriately to say that this is a Teams workspace, and then you go to your enterprise workspaces, which might have a different naming convention. Obviously, across all of these, there's different security and access controls and so on as well. So just going back to this, so that's typically talking about the separation of your dev, test, and production databases. We want to make sure that we control the deployment pipeline, i.e. we want to make sure that we control what goes into that enterprise environment. That can be through standard DevOps processes where somebody finally, when they've finished with their teams, their team's report, and they want to bring that into enterprise, they go ahead and check it in, for example, to some Git repository, which then kicks off a process for somebody to have a look at, review it, and then merge those changes eventually into their production environment. So they have some sort of branching strategy there, or it could be as simple as, hey guys, I've got this report ready. Can you have a look at it and move it from our Teams workspace into the enterprise environment? So it depends on where you are on the maturity curve there around DevOps processes. Using workspaces for business functions is exceptionally important, and how you set up that enterprise workspace environment would be around that. Limiting who can create new data sources, especially in that enterprise environment. The other thing, when users are going ahead and they're actually building their own reports, they're going to be connecting to many different data sources. They're going to be bringing that in. You need to let them know, and that's through the training, enablement, and COE, that there are certain data sets already available to them. If they're linking that data set to other data sets they're bringing in, you want to control how new data sets come into your enterprise environment. So you may not only be looking at the report, you'd be also looking at the data set and looking at the modeling standards and other things that come with that as well. And then finally, make sure that you certify those data sources as well as your data sets to make sure that you've got trusted data, that single source of truth in the new environment. So integrating Microsoft Purview with Power BI, there's two ways that you integrate. So Power BI can become a source for Purview. So Purview's got this concept of data sources as well, and they scan those data sources, and essentially Power BI becomes another data source that Purview can scan. And so through that, you begin to get an understanding of the Power BI assets that are being deployed, as well as the lineage inside of those assets. Another way that you want to maybe be able to bring Purview into Power BI is, how do you bring that business glossary and terms that you've created in Purview into the Power BI environment? What we've done is, I'm going to show you a demonstration in a moment. We've done a manual kind of integration with this, where we're going to export the business glossary terms, and we'll bring that into Power BI and then display those business glossary terms in terms of a tooltip within there. If you wanted to, however, you could probably access the Purview API and do some automated way of bringing it in. We haven't gone to that extent for this particular demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a very simple Power BI report. So we've got a Power BI report here. On the right hand side, I've got all of my fields and tables already defined. And on the in the report here, you can see I've got my sales quantity, and I've got a channel name, and in particular, I've got the different stores and my channels that I'm using in this particular report. What I want to do is, when I hover over this, I also want to understand the product category that this particular information is stored under. And so when I have my tooltip, I don't just want to show channel name, sales quantity, experts. I also want to bring in the definition of my product category in there as well. If I open up Purview, just give me one moment. I've got Purview, I've got my Contoso sales, and I've built a business glossary and a glossary of terms for a number of items that you can see under here. So under Contoso sales, I've got channel name, product name, sales amount, sales quantity, store name, etc. So I've started to build a glossary not only of my business definitions of some of my columns, but also some of my measures. Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new one under here. Just use the system default, and I'm going to create this as product category and give it a description. It always create a better description than that. I can also, do some other things within Purview, but we're not going to go into a lot of Purview demonstration at this point. This is really around the integration of Power BI, bringing this glossary into Power BI. So I'm going to create this, and I'm going to go back to my glossary terms, and we can now see I've got product category underneath there as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to export this out into a CSV. We'll just export those. I've already done this preparation for this webinar. Just export that. I'll open that up and you guys can have a look at what's inside there. So you can see my product category, and there's a whole bunch of information about this, right? Including who the experts might be, who the stewards might be. That could have all been defined inside of Purview. I'm going to close this down. Don't save that. And I'm going to go back to Power BI. So what we've done over here in the model is we've brought in this information, but we've also brought in an additional table, that's CSV, and essentially that's got all of the information in here that was in that CSV. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to refresh the data in here, and that will go down to that CSV file that I just had in there. And now if I just have a look at this data, edit query, and you can see it's now brought in the product name, sales amount, channel name, product category, sales quantity, and store name, and there's a definition in here. So in order for me to build that tooltip, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the report, and I'm going to create a new measure. Now I'm going to be lazy because there's quite a bit within this measure. I'm going to just copy and paste what I've already created as some DAX on this. And so essentially what we're doing is we're creating a new measure called definition, and we're having a look within that to say, hey, if you filtered the channel name, then bring out the Purview glossary term for channel name. If it's the product name, bring out the definition for product name. And if it's for product category, bring out the definition for product category. So just make sure that I've grabbed that, copy, and I will go and say, I won't do it on calendar. That's probably not a good idea, but it can be done on any table, really. Doesn't really matter. Click new measure there and just paste that in. So that's my DAX now pasted in, and just click away. It'll go and refresh on that. And now we've got definition in there as well. So you'll notice that it's not showing yet. I've already set up tooltips, etc., to include this definition. I'm just going to, sorry, just remove that. Go back to here. I'm just going to include this definition. And now when I hover over that, you can see it brings up the name of the channel through which the sale data is made is catalog online reseller store. Or what I could do is, instead of having channel name there, I can bring in product category, and I can now see the definition of my product category is it's the category for the product that I set up inside of Purview. Obviously, I can now take this and publish this into the service and so on. But essentially now that wraps up what we were going to talk about. If you have any questions, please post them into the question bar, or if you have any other questions, please contact us, and our contact details are on the next slide. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your time.